The judge leaned forward and looked at my 10-year-old son. "Caleb," he said, calm but firm, "you don't have to answer this if you're uncomfortable. But if you had to choose, who would you rather live with?" The courtroom went still. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and across the room my mother-in-law's lawyer shifted in his seat. Dorothy sat beside him, arms folded, lips tight like she had already won. Caleb glanced at me. His eyes were steady. Then he stood up, shoulders back, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "The one who taught me to fight without hurting people." Then he turned and pointed at me. That was the moment everything changed. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have witnesses. Dorothy came in with folders full of accusations and a paid attorney to present them. All I had was my voice and my son's trust. My name is Ava Linwood. I'm a mother, a widow, and a woman who almost lost everything to the one person who was supposed to be family. But this story isn't just about a custody battle. It's about what happens when someone tries to erase the bond between a mother and her child, and how love, honesty, and a 10-year-old boy's courage turned the tide in the most unexpected way. This is the day my mother-in-law tried to take my son from me, and the day he stood up for both of us. My name is Ava Linwood. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been raising my son, Caleb, on my own. We live in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon. The carpet is old, the windows rattle when it storms, and there's a stain on the ceiling that's been there since we moved in. But it's ours. I've worked 2 jobs to keep it that way. By day, I counsel teens at a community center. By night, I restock shelves at a grocery store 3 blocks away. It's not glamorous, but it pays the rent and keeps Caleb in sneakers that fit. I became a widow at 29. Michael, my husband, was everything I wasn't. Spontaneous, loud, and always chasing a thrill. I loved that about him. He made life feel electric. He also made it unpredictable. He was driving back from a weekend hike when his car spun out on black ice and flipped into a ravine. They said he died instantly. I used to find comfort in that until I realized it meant I never got to say goodbye. Michael's death shattered me, but it also woke something up inside me. I couldn't afford to fall apart. Caleb needed me. He was 7 at the time. The first night after the funeral, he climbed into my bed, curled up against my chest, and whispered, "Are you going to die too?" That moment broke me in a different way. I promised him I wouldn't. I promised I would stay, fight, and figure it all out. And I did. We built routines, Saturday pancakes, evening walks. Every Wednesday we practiced martial arts together. I wanted Caleb to know how to protect himself. But more than that, I wanted him to understand strength isn't about hurting people. It's about knowing when not to. Our bond was unshakable. At least I thought it was. The first sign of trouble came months after Michael died. His mother, Dorothy Linwood, started calling more often. At first it felt like grief. She wanted pictures of Caleb, updates, visits. I tried to include her. I sent holiday cards and invited her to Caleb's school events, but nothing I did was ever good enough. She would comment on my parenting like it was a performance she was critiquing. "You let him wear that to school? You shouldn't let him speak to you that way. Michael never had cavities. What are you feeding him?" I held my tongue. She was grieving too. I wanted to believe she meant well, but Dorothy didn't want a relationship with me. She wanted control. She started coming around unannounced. One time, I found her in my kitchen, rearranging my spice rack. Another time, she criticized my couch as inappropriate for a growing boy because it was secondhand. It was clear she didn't see me as Caleb's mother. She saw me as a placeholder, an obstacle. I tried to set boundaries. I told her I appreciated her involvement but needed space to parent in my own way. Her reaction was cold. "You were never right for Michael," she said, "and you're certainly not right for Caleb." That sentence rang in my ears for days. I tried to brush it off. People say things in grief. But something had shifted. There was venom in her voice. Something sharper than sadness. Around that time, Caleb started acting quieter after visits with her. He told me she kept asking questions about how we live. "Grandma says you cry a lot," he once said. "She said maybe you're too sad to take care of me." I confronted her. She didn't deny it. "I'm worried about him," she said flatly. "You're barely scraping by. He needs stability, a proper home, not whatever this is." That was the moment I realized she wasn't just being difficult. She was planning something. Still, I never expected what came next. 3 weeks later, a man in a suit knocked on my door. He handed me a thick envelope and asked me to sign. I opened it on the spot. The words blurred for a second, but I caught the ones that mattered. Petition for custody. Dorothy had filed for full custody of my son. She was taking me to court to claim that I was an unfit mother, that I was emotionally unstable, that Caleb would be better off with her. I stood in my living room, fingers shaking, as Caleb peeked around the corner. I looked at him, and all I could think was, how do I protect you from this? That was the moment my story changed. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman about to fight a battle I never saw coming. The custody papers stayed on my kitchen table for 2 full days before I could bring myself to read every word. They were cold, clinical, and brutal. Dorothy Linwood was accusing me of being emotionally unfit, mentally unstable, and financially incapable of caring for my son. She claimed I had isolated Caleb from his paternal family, that I worked too much, that I cried too often, that I showed signs of emotional breakdowns that put him at risk. She even had statements from one of my neighbors. I recognized the name. It was the man upstairs who always slammed his door when Caleb laughed too loud. According to his statement, he heard yelling and crying through my walls and suspected emotional disturbances. I sat at the table and felt my throat close. The page blurred, not because I was shocked, but because I knew she had been preparing for this all along. Every judgmental comment, every unannounced visit, every time she watched me like I was a weak animal waiting to fall apart, it had all been calculated. I called legal aid, hoping someone would tell me what to do. They were kind, but overwhelmed. The waiting list for representation was months long. They gave me a few numbers for pro bono attorneys. I called them all. Nothing. Either they were unavailable or my income was just high enough to disqualify me from free help, but too low to afford private counsel. I felt like I was sinking in quicksand, grabbing at anything I could, and finding nothing solid. The hearing was in 19 days. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have support. My parents passed away when I was a teenager, and my brother lives across the country. We hadn't spoken in years. I reached out to 2 friends I trusted, but both were hesitant to testify in court. They were scared to get involved. I was alone, but Caleb wasn't. That night, I sat on his bed and watched him sleep. He always looked so peaceful, even with everything swirling around us. I wanted to keep it all from him. I couldn't lie. The next morning, over cereal, I told him the truth. "Grandma wants you to live with her," I said. He blinked. "Like forever?" I nodded. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked, "Is that what you want?" "No," I said. "But we have to go to court, and the judge will decide." "Will they ask me?" "Maybe, if they think you understand what's going on." He set his spoon down and looked me straight in the eye. "I want to stay with you. I don't even like going to Grandma's." I reached for his hand. "You don't have to worry about this, okay? I'll do everything I can to fix it." But I wasn't sure how. I started preparing my own defense. I spent nights after work printing school records, letters from Caleb's teachers, and copies of his medical history. No missed appointments, no history of neglect. I wrote a timeline of the past 3 years and highlighted every stable, loving choice I had made. Still, it felt like bringing a paper shield to a war. One afternoon, Caleb came home with a drawing he made in class. It showed 2 stick figures, one tall, one small. They were holding hands under a tree. The caption said, "Home is where Mom is." I kept that drawing in my purse and planned to bring it to court, not as evidence, but as a reminder. I wasn't just defending my parenting. I was defending our life together, the quiet moments, the whispered stories before bed, the pancakes on Saturday, the lessons I taught him about kindness, about strength, about standing up for others. Dorothy didn't understand that. To her, parenting was about control and image. But to me, it was about connection, about showing up even when I was tired, listening even when I was hurting, and loving with every part of myself. As the hearing approached, the pressure built. I started having nightmares of losing him, waking up alone, hearing silence where his voice used to be. The morning before the court date, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself, pale, tired, nervous. But I was still standing. I didn't have money. I didn't have legal expertise. But I had truth, and I had a boy who believed in me. That had to be enough. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. What if I froze in court? What if Dorothy's lawyer twisted everything? What if the judge believed her? Every fear I had as a mother rose to the surface. I kept seeing Caleb's face in my mind, his laughter, the way he hugged me after a long day, the way he whispered, "I love you," as if it were a secret too big for the world to hold. That was what I was fighting for. At 2 a.m., I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. I made tea just to keep my hands busy. Then I sat down with the folder I had built over the last 2 weeks. Inside were school progress reports, letters from Caleb's martial arts instructor, a note from his pediatrician saying he was thriving both emotionally and physically. I knew it wasn't much compared to a legal team, but it was honest. It was real. I didn't know courtroom procedure. I didn't know what to wear to make a good impression or what kind of language a judge would respect, but I knew how to tell the truth, and I decided that was what I would do. I practiced what I would say. I wrote it down, read it aloud, deleted it, rewrote it, and finally I just spoke from the heart. I reminded myself of who I was. I wasn't unstable. I wasn't unfit. I was tired, yes. I was stretched thin, but I showed up for my son every single day, even when it hurt. That morning, I made Caleb pancakes. I always made them in the shape of animals. That day, he got a lion. "Is it because I have to be brave today?" he asked. I smiled. "Number, it's because you already are." We walked into the courthouse hand in hand. The hallway smelled like old books and disinfectant. My stomach was tight. My throat was dry. When I saw Dorothy sitting with her lawyer, I felt a wave of panic hit me. She looked polished, calm, completely in control. Her lawyer had a sleek black binder on the table and a yellow legal pad filled with notes. I had a manila folder, and the truth. The clerk called our case. We stepped inside the courtroom. It wasn't like the TV shows. It was quiet, almost plain. The judge looked serious, but not unkind. I stood at one table. Dorothy and her lawyer took the other. The proceedings started. Her lawyer spoke first. He presented a narrative of concern, of a grieving grandmother stepping in to protect a vulnerable child. He used words like instability and lack of structure. He called my parenting well-intentioned but inconsistent. He read from the neighbor's statement and presented photographs of my apartment, taken without my knowledge during one of Dorothy's visits. Then it was my turn. I stood up, holding my folder like a lifeline. My hands were trembling, but my voice held steady. I told the court I didn't come with legal jargon or professional testimony. I came with evidence of love. I explained how I worked 2 jobs so I could keep Caleb in his school, in his martial arts classes, in his community. I spoke about our routines, our traditions, our bond. I told them about the night Michael died and how I made a promise to Caleb that I would never leave him, no matter what. I described the fear of trying to parent through grief, the judgment I had faced, and the reality of doing it alone. The judge listened carefully. He asked a few questions. I answered them honestly. I didn't cry, though I wanted to. I stayed grounded because I knew falling apart in that moment would only play into Dorothy's narrative. Then the judge asked if Caleb wanted to speak. I looked at him. He looked at me. And then he nodded. He walked to the front of the room, small and serious, in his 2 big dress shoes. He stood straight and met the judge's eyes. "Caleb," the judge said gently, "you don't have to say anything if you're uncomfortable, but if you want to share how you feel, now would be a good time." Caleb took a breath. Then he said, clear and certain, "I want to live with my mom. She's the one who taught me to fight without hurting people. She teaches me how to be kind and strong at the same time." Then he turned, looked at me, and smiled. That moment cracked the room wide open. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't coached. It was real. It was enough to shift the energy in that courtroom. For the first time since this began, I felt like I wasn't the one on trial. The truth had finally spoken for itself. The courtroom was silent after Caleb spoke. The kind of silence that feels sacred, like everyone is holding their breath and no one wants to be the first to break it. He stood there for a few more seconds, then quietly walked back to the bench beside me. I reached for his hand. He took it without looking, and we just sat there side by side, steady and still. The judge sat back in his chair and adjusted his glasses. He looked down at the papers in front of him, then looked back up. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he cleared his throat. "Thank you, Caleb," he said. "Your words are very helpful." Dorothy's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, if I may." The judge raised a hand. "No, Mr. Keller, I've heard enough." Dorothy didn't speak. She hadn't said anything the entire time. She just watched us from across the room, her lips tight, her expression unreadable. She didn't expect this. She didn't expect him to choose me. I saw it in her eyes. The judge leaned forward slightly, speaking directly and deliberately. "This is a difficult case," he began. "I understand the petitioner's concerns and the motivations behind this filing. Family dynamics after the loss of a loved one are rarely simple." He paused, then turned to face me. "But Ms. Linwood, I've reviewed your file, your testimony, and what your son shared today. And based on what I've seen and heard, I believe Caleb is not only safe in your care, but deeply loved. The court finds no grounds to remove custody from you." It took a second for his words to settle into place in my mind. I blinked. Caleb squeezed my hand. That was the moment it hit me. We had won. Not because I had a lawyer, not because I had power or influence, but because the truth held its ground, because love, real and steady, had stood taller than fear. The judge looked at Dorothy. "Mrs. Linwood," he said, "I understand your desire to be involved in your grandson's life, but this court strongly encourages future interaction to happen through respectful communication and, if necessary, supervised mediation. This child deserves peace." Dorothy gave a small nod, almost imperceptible. The judge signed the final order, handed it to the clerk, and adjourned the hearing. Just like that, it was over. Outside the courtroom, the sky was overcast, but everything felt brighter. I walked with Caleb to the parking lot in silence for a while. He was quiet, thoughtful. Then he said, "Did I do okay?" I stopped walking. I knelt in front of him, looked him in the eye, and said, "You were perfect. You told the truth. That's all I ever needed from you." He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached his eyes. We got in the car. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Dorothy standing outside the courthouse doors. Her arms were crossed. Her eyes followed us. I didn't wave. I didn't stop. I had no anger left in me, only relief. At home, Caleb went straight to his room. When I walked in a little later to check on him, he was already changing out of his court clothes, pulling on his old hoodie and jeans like shedding a skin he never asked to wear. "Can we make spaghetti tonight?" he asked. "Of course," I said. "Garlic bread, too." He nodded and smiled again, then reached into his backpack and pulled out the drawing he made. The one with the 2 stick figures under the tree. He handed it to me. "I think we should frame it." I took it from him, my throat thick. "Yeah," I said. "We should." Later that night, after dinner and dishes and bedtime stories, I sat in my room with the court order in one hand and the drawing in the other. One was paper proof of my rights. The other was proof of something deeper, something no court could grant or take away. Love earned, trust built, a bond unshakable. I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I showed up, even when I was terrified. I told the truth, even when I thought no one would listen. And when it mattered most, my son stood beside me. Not because I asked him to, but because he knew I would do the same for him. That moment in the courtroom wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the beginning of something stronger. It's been 6 months since that day in court. Caleb still talks about it sometimes. Not the legal parts, not the tension or the silence, but the moment he stood up and said what he believed. He remembers how it felt to speak the truth in front of people who didn't expect him to have a voice. He didn't just defend me that day. He stepped into his own strength. I saw it happen right in front of me. Life after court didn't go back to normal. It changed, but not in the way I feared. Dorothy didn't speak to us for weeks. Then one afternoon, out of the blue, she called. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. "I didn't understand," she said. "I thought I was helping, but I see now I wasn't listening." She didn't apologize exactly, but it was the closest she had ever come. We agreed to start over slowly. Visits would happen only if Caleb wanted them. They'd be short, supervised, and on neutral ground. To my surprise, he said yes. I asked him why. He shrugged and said, "I think maybe she needs a second chance." so we're trying. Not because I need her in his life, but because he wants to give her a chance on his own terms. That matters. But more than anything, what changed after the hearing was me. I used to believe I had to be everything for Caleb. The provider, the protector, the role model, the emotional anchor. I thought if I made one mistake, if I stumbled even for a moment, everything would fall apart. That pressure nearly broke me. But that courtroom taught me something I didn't expect. I don't have to be perfect to be a good mother. I just have to be present, honest, consistent. I have to love him in a way he can feel, in a way he can rely on. And I do. Every time I get up before the sun to make him breakfast, every time I listen to his stories, even when I'm exhausted, every time I show up, he sees that, and he carries it with him. A few weeks ago, I was volunteering at the community center after work. One of the teenage boys I mentor was lashing out during a session. Instead of raising my voice, I sat down next to him. I asked him to breathe with me. I told him that feeling angry didn't make him bad. It made him human. He calmed down. Later, Caleb asked me why I always talk to people like that. Because I want them to remember they're more than their worst day, I said. He nodded, then asked, "Is that what you did in court?" I thought about it for a moment. "Yeah," I said. "That's exactly what I did." We're still a little apartment, still making pancakes on Saturdays, still walking to the store to save on gas. Now we walk with our heads a little higher. That courtroom didn't make me a better mother, but it forced me to see that I already was one. And Caleb saw it too. In the end, that was all the proof we needed. If you're watching this and you're in a fight you never asked for, if you're being told you're not enough, I want you to hear this from someone who's been there. You are not defined by how others see you. You are not measured by your lowest moment. You are measured by what you choose to show up for, by how you love, by how you protect what matters most. For me, that was my son. And for him, it was me. I will never forget the moment he stood up in that courtroom and said, "The one who taught me to fight without hurting people." Not just because he pointed at me, but because in that moment I saw the kind of man he's becoming. And I knew without a doubt we would be okay. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own strength, or someone else's, please take a moment to like the video. It helps more people find it. Share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone, especially if they're going through something hard. And if you've ever had to stand your ground, fight for your family, or simply hold on when everything felt like it was falling apart, I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real stories that speak from the heart. We're building a space here for truth, healing, and connection, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Thanks for watching. You matter. Your story matters, and someone out there needs to hear it.